Back in January 2025, many commentators saw Donald Trump's return as US president as a boon to Europe's radical right, with figures from Hungary's Viktor Orbán to Germany's Alice Weidel hoping that an ally in the White House might help them dismantle the EU and catalyse support for nationalist parties across Europe. However, by late 2025, polls showed that Trump was pretty unpopular even among supporters of Europe's right-wing populist parties. And in the past 3 weeks, since the US and Israel launched their unpopular war on Iran, parties on the European right, from France's National Rally to the Alternative for Germany, have tried to distance themselves from Trump, leading to some suggestions that the transatlantic populist alliance might now be falling apart. So in this video, we'll discuss the changing relationship between Trump and Europe's political right, and explain why the European right now seems to be turning against him. Gone are the days of elite, carefully groomed Kremlin operatives working under diplomatic cover. In this issue of Too Long, we explore how Russia's war in Ukraine shattered its traditional spy networks, and how Moscow is now turning to teenagers, small-time criminals, and online recruits to wage a quieter war across Europe. That's just one of 72 pages in the magazine, because as always, there's more to Too Long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. We'll start with a summary of Trump's relationship with the European populist right. Trump's victory in the November 2024 US presidential election was celebrated by figures on the European radical right, who saw Trump as their ideological ally in America. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni predicted the US-Italy relationship would grow even stronger. Dutch far-right leader Geert Wilders told Trump to never stop, always keep fighting. The leader of the Alternative for Germany, or AfD, Alice Weidel, called Trump a model for us and said the result was a defeat for woke Hollywood. And Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, arguably Trump's closest European ally, described Trump's victory as a great chance for Hungary to be in close partnership and alliance with the US. However, whilst Europe's radical right was generally ecstatic, some figures, like France's Marine Le Pen, seemed more cautious. As commentators like The Guardian's John Henley and Chatham House's Armida van Rij suggested, supporting Trump could end up backfiring on Europe's hard right, given Trump's America First aims. During his campaign, Trump had signalled the possibility of a US-EU trade war, pledging to impose tariffs on all EU imports, a move that would hurt European industrial interests, with analysts also noting that Trump's foreign policy would likely clash with the pro-Ukraine and pro-NATO stances of some of his allies, like Italy's Meloni. Interestingly, pre-US election polling found that supporters of two European hard-right parties, France's National Rally and the Sweden Democrats, actually wanted the Democrats' Kamala Harris to win, not Trump. This might sound surprising, but it's likely because they thought Trump's tariff policy towards Europe would end up hurting their own economies too. Anyway, within weeks of taking office in early 2025, Trump's largely anti-European security and trade policies came to fruition. After suspending US intelligence sharing with Kyiv in early March, following a public clash with Zelensky, Trump launched a transatlantic trade war in April with his so-called Liberation Day tariffs, including a 20% tariff on all EU imports. Some of Europe's radical right criticised the tariffs, with AfD leader Weidel calling them far too aggressive and self-defeating, while others condoned them, with Orbán describing the trade war as tactical and AfD co-chair Tino Kruppala calling it understandable. As time went on, Trump became increasingly unpopular in Europe, even among supporters of Europe's radical right. A Politico Public First poll from December 2025 found that, in France and Germany, while radical right-wing voters were more likely than the general population to view Trump positively, they were split pretty evenly into thirds in terms of viewing him positively, neither positively nor negatively, or negatively, while in the UK, a higher share, nearly half, of populist right-wing voters saw Trump positively. As such, in recent months, some figures on Europe's radical right have become more openly critical of the US president's actions. In late January, following Trump's attack on Venezuela and threats towards Greenland, the president of France's National Rally, Jordan Bardella, criticised what he called Trump's imperial ambitions and said the EU should, quote, activate its anti-coercion instruments without delay and take targeted measures against American services and exports heading to Europe. Similarly, earlier this month, the AfD leaders condemned the US's strikes on Iran, with co-leader Kruppala even accusing the Trump administration of war crimes, citing its attack on an Iranian girls' school. So why is the European right apparently now turning on Trump? Well, the main reason is because Trump is extraordinarily unpopular in Europe. In January, Trump had net negative favourability ratings of at least -60 in all of Western Europe, and so far in 2026 seems to have done even more to anger and upset Europe. First, Trump made repeated threats to seize Danish and NATO territory Greenland, followed by an economic threat of an additional 10% tariff on 8 European countries opposed to the move. Then, the fatal shooting of 2 US citizens by US federal immigration agents provoked horror in Europe and calls for ICE to be banned from its security role at Italy's Winter Olympics. And last month, Trump launched his unpopular war against Iran, with the US-Israeli strikes opposed by majorities in Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK. Not only does aligning with Trump put Europe's populist right against public opinion in their own countries, but there's also evidence that doing the opposite, in other words, actively criticising or standing up to Trump, can bring electoral benefits. We've recently seen this in Denmark, where centre-left Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen saw a 5-point polling bounce after her firm defence of Greenland against Trump's threats of annexation, prompting her to call an early election, taking place next week, to take advantage of her renewed popularity. This is also why parts of the centre-right in Europe have started distancing themselves from Trump. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, for instance, who initially seemed supportive of the US's military action in Iran, saying now is not the time to lecture our allies, has since become much more critical, with his spokesperson describing it as not NATO's war and saying it has nothing to do with NATO. Similarly, the UK's Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch, has also tried to distance herself from her previous comments, having initially argued that the UK should have let the US use its bases to attack Iran. The second reason the European right seems to be turning on Trump is the US's trade policy. As some analysts pointed out last year, Trump's tariff policies would likely hurt European industries and businesses, with a Bruegel analysis from April 2025 finding that workers in Italy, the second largest EU exporter to the US, would be more exposed to Trump's tariffs due to Italy's fashion and car manufacturing industries. Trump's tariffs on Chinese goods have also meant that cheap Chinese exports are now being redirected to European markets, undercutting European manufacturers. Neither of these policies have been good for export-led European countries, hence the more subdued reaction of France's radical right after Trump's victory. In conclusion, while there's a lot more we could say on this topic, the main takeaway is that aligning with Trump is clearly a high-risk strategy for Europe's populist right, who might ultimately be forced to dump Trump or be damaged by association. As we mentioned earlier, the latest issue of our magazine, Too Long, is out now, which means that if you order a physical edition, it will be shipped to you immediately. And if you buy a digital edition, it will land in your inbox straight away. No pre-ordering, no waiting. Plus, if you subscribe while you're there, using the code SPRING26, you'll get your first copy for as little as £4.99, as well as 20% off every future issue as long as you stay subscribed. One other thing to know though, is that if you're more of a listener than a reader, which would be fair enough, we are a YouTube channel after all, then this time round we've recorded every article in Too Long, with each of our writers doing their best audiobook impression while narrating their own articles. The New Age of Empires, written and read by Georgina Finley. If you want that, then you can sign up to our new Too Long and TLDR Party bundle. That gets you a copy of the magazine and also access to TLDR Party on new subscription. Party members not only get access to the audio versions of every article, but they also get access to our documentaries, like our new series Leaders and Losers, and our upcoming documentary that we're recording in Greenland right now. They also get access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, our bonus podcast, The Last Move, their name printed in every issue of our magazine, and more. Find out more about the TLDR Party by clicking the link in the description, while you'll also find a link to subscribe to Too Long and our documentaries.